The scream didn't carry far in space, just enough to rattle the inside of Sasha Renner's helmet before the comms cut out. She froze in the middle of her repair work, her gloved hands hovering over the cracked sensor panel. A faint hiss of static filled her ears where Vega's voice should have been. "Vega, repeat that, I lost you." No answer. Only the faint hum of her suit's life support system. Her tether swayed in the black void connecting her to the Peregrine. The silvery line gleamed against the scatter of distant stars, the only thing between her and infinite nothingness. She followed the tether with her eyes, only to feel her stomach drop. It was frayed. Not cut like from a micrometeorite impact, not a clean snap from overstrain. The fibers curled and twisted like something had chewed through them. The ends swayed lazily, unattached to anything. Her eyes darted past it into the infinite black, scanning for Vega. He had been right there, 20 meters off her port side, just a minute ago. Now, there was only empty space. "Vega, do you read?" Her own voice sounded small and fragile, as though the void might swallow it whole. Something flickered in the distance. It wasn't a light. It wasn't a reflection. It was the absence of light, a smear of shadow moving across the starfield. At first, she thought her visor display was glitching, but then the smear shifted, flowing like liquid darkness, erasing stars as it moved. Her pulse thumped hard in her ears. She reached instinctively for her thruster controls, but the thing stopped moving. It was watching her. She could feel it. A sharp crackle jolted through her comm, and a whisper slid into her ear. "You left the hatch open." Her mouth went dry. "Vega, what?" Silence. The whisper hadn't sounded like Vega. It hadn't sounded entirely human. The Peregrine loomed in the distance, her ship, her sanctuary. Only, it wasn't in the same position it had been moments ago. Its orientation had shifted, and it looked farther away. That shouldn't have been possible. In 0G, movement obeyed physics, momentum, inertia. The Peregrine looked as though it had chosen to move. Her breathing sped up, fogging her visor. Okay, just get to the airlock. Just get inside." She kicked her thrusters, propelling herself toward the vessel. The movement felt wrong, her depth perception skewed, like she was moving through a thick, invisible fluid. The Peregrine seemed to stretch away from her, its edges warping. Behind her, in the corner of her visor, the darkness shifted again, not rushing at her, just following. Her suit's proximity alarm beeped. She was 10 meters from the hull. The airlock door was closed. That's fine, she told herself. Just cycle it open. But the control panel beside the hatch was dark. No status lights, no interface. Her suit comm crackled again, the same whisper as before. "You left the hatch open." Her chest tightened. She turned in the void, scanning the Peregrine's hull. The rear maintenance hatch, the one Vega had been working near, was open. A perfect black circle in the ship's silver skin, and something was moving inside it. She didn't wait to see what. She fired her thrusters and sailed toward the rear hatch. The darkness beyond it wasn't just unlit. It seemed deeper than shadow, swallowing the gleam of her helmet lamp. As she drifted inside, the sound of her breathing echoed louder in her ears, like the ship's walls were pressing closer. The instant she cleared the hatch, it slid shut behind her with a hiss. Her helmet display pinged. Airlock sealed. Only she wasn't in the airlock. She floated in the central corridor, the familiar white paneling stretching before her, but wrong, longer, narrower. The handholds were farther apart than they should have been, and there was no sign of Vega. She reached up and tapped her helmet controls. "Astra status report, where's Vega?" The ship's AI replied, but the voice was off, slower, too smooth. "Vega is not aboard." Her stomach nodded. "What do you mean? He was outside, Static swallowed her voice. When it cleared, the AI spoke again, its tone lower. "The hatch is open." A cold shiver rippled down her spine. Somewhere deeper in the ship, a metallic clang echoed through the hull, distant but purposeful. She twisted in midair, eyes on the far end of the corridor. Something was there, not a person, not even a shape she could fully see, just an absence in the air, a faint warping of the light, as if space itself were bending around it. Then it moved toward her. Sasha's instincts screamed at her to move. She yanked herself along the handholds, kicking into a 0G glide. The thing in the corridor didn't rush after her, but it didn't need to. It slid forward without sound, its edges still impossible to focus on, like trying to see the back of your own head. The corridor lights dimmed as she passed, not flickering, dimming, as though the ship itself was being drained of power, or worse, of light. Her gloved hand missed a rung. She spun in midair, her shoulder slamming into the wall with a dull thunk. Pain bit through the suit's padding. She gritted her teeth and righted herself, forcing her breathing to slow. Focus. Think. She needed to get to the bridge. From there, she could get a full internal scan, maybe even trigger emergency protocols to seal whatever this was out. She launched forward again, aiming for the junction that would take her to the core lift. The AI's voice slid into her ear. No calm crackle this time, just there. Don't run. It likes when you run. Sasha's breath fogged the visor again. Astra, what the hell is aboard my ship? Not aboard. Inside. There was a pause, a longer one. It is older than ships. Her throat tightened. Where's Vega? Silence. The junction came into view. She hooked her hand on the rail and swung into the next corridor. That's when she saw it. Black residue smeared across the walls and handholds. It wasn't liquid exactly, but it wasn't solid either. Her helmet lamp didn't reflect off it. Instead, the light seemed to sink into it like water into sand. It pulsed faintly, almost in time with her own heartbeat. She kept moving, but the residue was everywhere now. Along the ceiling, the floor panels, even floating in globules that drifted in 0G like oil in water. She adjusted her course to avoid touching them. The clang came again, closer this time. Not mechanical, not random. It had weight, intent. She passed an open storage compartment and froze. The walls inside were bent. The straight aluminum bulkheads were warped into a shallow curve, as if the space had been stretched. In the far corner, something floated. Vega's helmet. The visor cracked, the inside dark. She didn't go in. When she reached the lift, the control panel was already active. The doors slid open before she could touch them. Inside, the lift chamber was pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows your depth perception. She hesitated. The AI's voice came again, softer this time. It's waiting in there. Her skin prickled under her suit. Then I'll take the maintenance shaft. Better, Astra said, almost sounding pleased. Sasha kicked upward, grabbing the access rung above the lift doors. The narrow crawl space beyond was tight, barely wide enough for her suit, but it was lit by a flickering emergency strip. As she pulled herself through, she heard movement below. No footsteps, more like fabric tearing or metal flexing. It rose into the shaft, faint but getting closer. She climbed faster, arms burning from the exertion. The light strips dimmed one by one behind her. She emerged into the deck above and floated into the corridor toward the bridge. The door was ajar. Another impossibility. Ship systems didn't allow for that in vacuum-ready compartments. Inside, the bridge looked wrong. The console lights were all on, but the panels displayed nothing but static. The data warped into jagged spirals. The viewport wasn't showing the starfield outside. It was black, as though the glass looked into an empty room. Sasha stepped forward, her boots clamped to the deck in mag mode, a comforting shift back into artificial gravity. Her hand reached for the console, and then froze. Reflected faintly in the blank viewport was a shape standing behind her. Sasha's muscles went rigid. The reflection in the viewport was almost human in outline, tall, narrow shoulders, elongated arms, but its edges bled into the air like heat waves rising from asphalt. She couldn't tell if it was inches behind her or meters away. She didn't turn. Her mind told her that whatever it was, it wanted her to turn. That reflexive, prey-like reaction, it was waiting for it. Her breath came faster. The inside of her visor was slick with condensation. "Astra," she whispered, "what's behind me?" The AI's reply was instant. "You." Her pulse thudded hard enough to hurt. She forced herself to breathe in through her nose, out through her mouth. She'd been trained for deep space emergencies. This wasn't in the manual. She risked a glance at the reflection. The thing tilted its head, a slow, unnatural angle further than a human neck should bend. Then its form folded, collapsing inward, as though it were peeling itself through an invisible crack in reality. The temperature in the bridge plummeted. Frost began to feather across the inside of her visor. Sasha gritted her teeth, slammed her palm onto the bridge console, and killed the maglocks on her boots. She let herself drift backward, not toward it, but sideways, into a spin that carried her toward the far wall. If it lunged, she'd at least have momentum to work with. It didn't lunge. Instead, the shadow elongated, stretching across the deck like spilled ink, flowing up the bulkhead toward her. Where it touched the walls, the metal puckered inward, as though space itself was being pulled thin. Her comm crackled again, but this time, the whisper was inside her helmet, not over the radio. "You left the hatch open." Her eyes darted to the door. She needed to get out. She kicked off the console, pushing herself toward the bridge exit. But before she reached it, the doorway warped, the edges curling inward, sealing like melting plastic. A heartbeat later, it was just wall. She was trapped. The shadow surged upward, forming a loose, humanoid frame again. This time there were eyes, 2 pinpoints of white, sharp enough to hurt to look at, set in the shifting black. Sasha's chest ached from holding her breath. It leaned toward her, not moving through space so much as erasing the distance between them. Her visor display glitched, HUD elements flickering into unreadable symbols. And then it spoke again, but not in her ears, in her mind, the voice like cold metal dragged across stone. "You've been here before." Her teeth chattered. "No," she said, barely audible. "No, I haven't." "Yes," the voice echoed inside her skull. "You left." She pushed herself away, desperate to keep distance. "What do you want?" The white pinpoints flared. "To take you back." Before she could react, the thing lashed out, not with an arm, but with a tendril of pure shadow that moved faster than thought. It coiled around her torso, the suit sensors screaming as pressure readings spiked. She tried to activate her thrusters, but the controls were unresponsive. The shadow had wormed its way into the suit systems. Her O2 warning flashed red. She felt her body lifted off the deck, the artificial gravity ignored entirely. The shadow was pulling her upward, toward the ceiling. The walls began to stretch again, warping like soft clay. She realized with gut-churning certainty that it wasn't taking her to another room, it was taking her out. She clawed at her leg harness and found her repair torch. Her hands shook so violently she almost dropped it. She thumbed the ignition. A spear of blue-white flame erupted in 0G. The shadow recoiled, not from the heat. She could tell it didn't feel heat the way living things did, but from the light. It hissed without sound, the points of its eyes shrinking into pinpricks before vanishing entirely. The tendril loosened. Sasha kicked herself free, slammed into the far bulkhead, and didn't stop moving. She tore open a maintenance hatch and shoved herself inside, sealing it behind her. Only when the hatch clicked did she realize her O2 gauge was in the yellow. The shadow had done more than squeeze, it had siphoned air. The maintenance hatch sealed with a magnetic thunk, and for a few precious seconds, all Sasha could hear was her own ragged breathing. Her helmet display read O2, 43%. She braced herself in the narrow crawl space, the metal cool beneath her gloves. Her pulse slowed enough for her thoughts to sharpen, though the image of those pinprick eyes lingered like an afterimage on her retinas. It hadn't just grabbed her, it had known her, or thought it did. And that whisper, "You left the hatch open," why say that? Why repeat it? She shook the thought away. First priority, get to the life support hub, recalibrate air pressure, seal the thing off. Then maybe think about making it to the escape pod. Sasha pulled herself deeper into the crawl space. The low red emergency lights pulsed every 2 seconds, throwing her shadow ahead of her in jagged flashes. She reached an access grate, twisted the locks, and slid into a corridor she recognized, or thought she recognized. Something was wrong. The corridor was at least twice as long as it should have been. The handholds were spaced unevenly. Some bulkhead panels didn't match, as though they'd been taken from an entirely different ship and jammed into place. Her stomach lurched. The ship's schematics were burned into her brain from years aboard, but this wasn't possible. She tapped her comm. "Astra, give me internal mapping." The AI's voice was slower than before, drawn-out syllables like honey dripping from a spoon. Mapping. Incomplete. Why? Spaces do not match recorded dimensions. Her breath caught. Spaces? Plural? Yes, the peregrine is expanding. A metallic groan echoed through the corridor, long drawn out like a deep sigh. The lights flickered, and for a heartbeat, the walls appeared to pulse, bulging inward and out as if the ship itself were breathing. Sasha pushed off a handhold, gliding toward the end of the corridor. But the farther she went, the farther away the bulkhead seemed. Every kick of her legs should have halved the distance, but the end never came closer. A cold certainty prickled up her spine. The ship was stretching around her. She stopped moving, heart hammering. Astra, is the entity causing this? The AI's pause was longer this time. Yes. She swallowed hard. Can I get to the escape pod? Silence. Astra, answer me. There are no escape pods. Her breath fogged the visor. That's a lie. I saw them in dock 2 days ago. They were never here. The corridor lights all went out at once. In the black, she could hear movement. Not the gliding silence from before, but scraping, as though claws were dragging along the inside of the walls. Sometimes the sound came from ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes inside the bulkheads. Her suit's helmet lamp flared on automatically, casting a narrow cone ahead of her. The far bulkhead, the one she'd been trying to reach, was right there. She hadn't moved. On it, in streaks of that light-swallowing black residue, was a crude outline of a human figure. Tall, long arms, white pinprick dots where the eyes should be. Her chest tightened. She kicked backward, but the figure's arm stretched, the outline flowing toward her like ink in water. The inky outline's arm slid off the bulkhead like liquid shadow, its edges dissipating into the air but never losing form. Sasha shoved herself away, her helmet scraping the opposite wall. The motion carried her into a slow spin down the corridor, her own reflection in the visor's glass blurring in and out of view. She spotted a hatch overhead, an access to one of the vertical maintenance ladders. If she could get to Deck 3, she could reach the life support hub. At the very least, she could buy herself more time before her O2 gauge dipped into the red. The hatch wheel resisted at first, like it hadn't been turned in decades. With a grunt, she forced it to spin, and the hatch swung inward with a metallic groan. She pulled herself into the shaft. The ladder rungs floated in 0G, anchored only by the shaft's narrow framework. She grabbed the first rung and started pulling herself upward. The shaft stretched above her, vanishing into darkness. Below, the bulkhead she'd just escaped was gone. Instead, she saw another shaft stretching downward, exactly the same as the one she was in. She didn't have time to think about it. She climbed. 1 rung, 2, 3. Her arms burned, her breath loud in the helmet. Then she froze. The panel markings beside her, faded white stenciling on the shaft wall, read L3, Deck 3. Already. She'd expected at least 10 meters of climbing. She reached for the hatch at this level, spun the wheel and pushed it open. The corridor beyond was the same one she'd just left. Same warped bulkheads, same uneven handholds, same black smear on the far wall. Only, the human outline was gone. Her breathing came faster. This wasn't just wrong, it was impossible. The shaft should have connected different decks, not looped her into the same corridor. "Astra," she said, her voice shaky, "are you altering the ship's schematics?" The AI's tone was almost gentle. "I do not alter, I adapt." "To what?" "To you." She wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. She pushed away from the hatch, determined to try again. Maybe she'd missed something, a visual glitch, a misread marking. She went back into the shaft and climbed downward this time. After 6 rungs, she reached another hatch. The markings beside it read L3 again. Her stomach knotted. She opened the hatch. The same corridor, only now the lights were dimmer. The air felt colder, and the smear on the far wall was back. This time it wasn't a crude figure, it was a perfect outline of her. Helmet, suit, torch clipped to her hip. The scraping started again, this time directly overhead in the shaft. She slammed the hatch shut and kicked off the rungs, climbing upward as fast as she could. The scraping followed. The shaft lights flickered, and each time they came back, the walls seemed closer together, as if the ship was squeezing her path shut. She reached another hatch, wrenched it open, and spilled into a corridor she didn't recognize. Narrow, with pipes lining both walls, the air thick with the metallic tang of recycled oxygen. Her O2 gauge blinked, 31%. No time to think. She pushed off down the corridor, her helmet lamp slicing through the gloom. A faint whisper echoed ahead, not over comms, not in her head, in the air itself. "You left the hatch open." She didn't look back. The whisper seemed to ride on the air, curling along the pipes at her sides. It wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. Behind her, above her, sometimes so close it felt like the words brushed the back of her neck. Sasha propelled herself forward, boots set to mag off for speed, pulling on handholds and shoving off bulkheads to maximize momentum. Her breaths came too fast, eating away at her precious O2. A clang rang out behind her, sharp, deliberate, not the dull groan of shifting metal, but a blow. Something was inside the corridor she'd just left. She risked a glance over her shoulder. A ripple in the air, like heat distortion, moved toward her, faster now. The bulkheads it passed buckled inward, leaving faint black scars in the metal. Sasha hit the next junction, banking left without slowing. She bounced off the far wall, using the rebound to propel herself into a long glide. The narrow passage here opened into a vertical chamber with no floor or ceiling, just a hollow column of machinery. A perfect place to lose it. She kicked herself into the center of the chamber, grabbing a floating maintenance cable to steady her spin. Her helmet lamp swept the space in arcs, revealing jagged shadows from the piping and conduits that climbed the column's walls. She aimed for an exit hatch halfway up. The instant she started climbing toward it, the hatch slammed shut with a hollow boom. Another hatch on the opposite side sealed, then another, and another. In seconds, every possible exit was gone. Astra's voice came over comms, smooth and low. "You can go nowhere it does not allow." Sasha clenched her jaw. "Then maybe I make it let me." "Unlikely." The ripple slid into the chamber from below. This time it didn't hide its shape. It unfolded into a tall, impossibly thin silhouette with arms that swayed like fronds in deep water. Its face, if it had one, was nothing but those 2 white pinpricks burning without light. It drifted upward toward her without moving its limbs. The chamber around them seemed to lengthen, the walls receding into impossible depth. She unhooked her repair torch, thumbed the ignition, and fired a blinding arc into the air between them. The blue-white flare reflected off every metal surface, slicing shadows apart, but not the things. Its outline didn't change. Instead, it pulsed. Her helmet HUD glitched. Readouts scrambled. O2 gauge dropped 5% in an instant. It wasn't just chasing her, it was feeding on her suit's systems. With no exits left, Sasha did the only thing she could think of. She kicked off the central column wall at full force, aiming straight through the thing. The moment she touched it, her vision went black. Not unconsciousness, not yet, but a blackout so complete her brain couldn't even process distance. She felt as if she were falling and floating at the same time, spinning without end. Then she slammed into a solid surface. Lights snapped back into her visor. She was lying against the bulkhead of a new corridor. Only this one, she recognized. The drive core access hall. Her stomach sank. The thing hadn't failed to stop her. It had brought her here. The far end of the hall glowed faintly from the core containment chamber, a sickly green-white shimmer that bled into the dark. The shadows along the walls didn't match the piping. Astra's voice came again, almost sympathetic. "It will not let you leave now." Sasha forced herself to stand, maglocks re-engaged with a heavy click. "Then I'm taking it with me." The corridor to the drive core felt wrong. The metal beneath Sasha's boots thrummed with a pulse out of sync with the ship's systems. Too slow, too deep, like a heartbeat from something that shouldn't exist. The core chamber's blast doors were half open, stuck in place. Beyond them, the drive's containment field shimmered like oil over water, bending the light in ways that made her stomach flip. The entity was here. She didn't have to see it. Every molecule of the air screamed its presence. Her helmet comm hissed with static, punctuated by fragments of whispers that were almost her own voice. "It's already inside you. Step closer. Make it real." She moved toward the control console on the far side, boots dragging against the floor as if the ship itself didn't want her to get there. The containment readouts were unstable. Gravitational flux readings spiked and dipped in patterns that looked eerily like a cardiogram. The drive was alive. No time to think. She pulled up the manual override sequence, fingers trembling as she punched in the code for an emergency overload. If she could flood the containment coils with raw power, she might tear the drive open just enough to pull the thing back into whatever space it came from. A long, low groan rolled through the chamber. She looked up and froze. The entity was in the containment field, not floating, not separate, inside. Its tall, thin silhouette was stretched across the distortion, bending with the curvature of the shimmering field. The white pinprick eyes stared out at her from every angle at once. The countdown began. 0:30. The blast door slammed shut behind her. No turning back now. She grabbed a loose conduit from the maintenance rack and jammed it into the primary power feed, forcing the coils to draw more energy than they could safely handle. The lights dimmed, then flared bright enough to burn after images across her vision. 0:20. The field rippled. The entity's arms extended through it, impossibly long, the tips dragging across the floor like dripping ink. 0:15. Her comm went dead. The HUD flickered, replaced by a single message in blocky white text. "Why leave?" 0:10. The arms lashed toward her. She dove sideways, maglocks disengaging mid-roll. The floor shook, not from impact, but from space itself twisting. 0:5. She slammed her palm onto the manual release and yanked the final lever. The containment field convulsed, collapsing inward before blowing outward in a silent, blinding eruption of warped light. For a fraction of a second, the world went inside out. The walls curved away from her. The floor became horizonless sky, and the stars outside bent into spirals. The entity was dragged toward the tear, its body unraveling into streaks of darkness that screamed without sound. Sasha felt herself pulled too, the force trying to turn her bones into ribbons. She clung to the conduit, every muscle burning, the edges of her vision going black. Then, nothing. When she opened her eyes, She was floating. No up, no down. The ship was gone. The stars looked wrong. And somewhere, behind her, something whispered. Not in malice this time, but in recognition. You opened the door.